Right.
Hmm. So I wanted to talk about an interesting concept in the yogic culture. It's the difference between Jaya and Vijaya or Jaya and Vijay. Because normally the two words are used as synonyms, but they are not. So even when the whole Jai Sri Ram and everything, Jai Sri Ram, which is actually not accurate, it should be Jaya Sri Ram or Rama, Jaya Sri Rama. But okay, that's little semantic. But still, since we are talking about Sanskrit, there is what Jai Sri Ram doesn't mean what people think it means. Because Jaya and Vijaya are aspects of internal and external dimensions. Vijaya or Vijay is external triumph, external success, external glory. When we triumph over adversity, we triumph over opponents, we triumph over situations, a country beats another country, those are all the visible physical domain victories. Vijay. Jaya is the internal transformation and the conquest and the success of the self. Now, do you remember there was that old song from Goody, which is still very popular song, हमको मन की शक्ति देना मन विजय करे, दूसरों की जय से पहले खुद को जय करे. दूसरों पे जय हो ही नहीं सकता है. So that was for rhythm and meter reasons that it was said like that. Man Vijay Kare, that actually is quite, that let us conquer the mind. That is quite insightful. You can conquer the mind because the mind is still, if not fully the body, it is still within the bodily dimension. It is still within the tangible dimension, the mind. So yes, the mind can be conquered. But the Jaya is the, so the Buddha made a very famous statement once where he said that greater than the man who has conquered 100 cities is the man who has conquered himself. So he was explaining the difference between Vijaya and Jaya. Because 100 cities, Alexander, Tamerlane, Genghis Khan, they are all still Vijaya people. They are not Jaya people. And this has always been the core difference perhaps between India and any other culture in the world, that the Indian mind has always been seeking the Jaya, the internal victory, more than the Vijaya. We are not a triumphalist people. We are not a conquering people. Not really. And even when a king like Samudragupta goes around conquering everybody, it is more a sort of moral victory, because the first thing he would do after defeating them would be to set them back on the throne. All they had to do was promise to be loyal to him. So he wouldn't annex the kingdom and he wouldn't make it part of his. So it was, Western historians were completely flummoxed by that, and they said, "What kind of imperial policy is this? This is to catch butterflies and set them free." They they did not understand that. Why would you do that? Why would you come all this way, defeat somebody in battle, and then immediately put him back on the throne? Because for Samudragupta, he wanted everybody to know that I am the top power in India. But he didn't want to humiliate anybody and he didn't want to exploit anybody. So it's a very Indian concept. The Indians understand that perfectly. They understand that sense of he's made his point. There is no need to push it to the point of you know now torturing and exploiting and humiliating. And I have always found Samudragupta to be a truly great man, unlike Ashoka, who was probably one of the truly great hypocrites of the world, because he filled up all India with graffiti on pillars, boasting about his so called virtues. But when he conquered Kalinga, everybody forgets that he gave up war and he didn't give up Kalinga. He held that very tightly. His grandfather Chandragupta had no such false pretense to honor and no such false pretense to nobility. He was what he was. This man, why would we believe a ruler? Why would we believe a person merely because he proclaims that about himself? Why is that taken as gospel truth? I mean, what kind of naivete and childishness is that? This is rather like the Roman Emperor Augustus. As he grew in power, his proclamations grew more and more humble. The more dictatorial and brutal he got, the more he would say, I am the first servant of Rome. And this whole myth around Ashoka has always flummoxed me. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to take any of that at face value. Kings always lie about themselves. The only contemporary records, the Hindu records, they have called him and the later Maurya Rakshasas. And that is because he was not privileging them. So, but thing is, he conquered, he didn't reinstate, he held on tightly. Samudragupta used to conquer and then he would put them back on the throne. So Samudragupta was looking for Jaya. He was looking for that, he was looking and exploring his abilities. To what extent can I do this? Once he got the point, he stopped conquering also. Only when he was a young man, he would go on these rampages. He stopped conquering. And what Aurangzeb later on kept trying to do, you know, Aurangzeb also made the same mistake of constantly trying to conquer, assimilate, and he saw that it was impossible. Whereas Akbar also instinctively used to do what Samudragupta did. Even if he never knew about Samudragupta, he would conquer a place and then he would put the ruling family right back over there. And that is the reason why the Indians responded so much to Akbar, because very intuitively they knew that this man is functioning as an Indian ruler would function. He is functioning according to the values of the culture, very, very intuitively, which is why the Rajputs supported the Mughals so much. Now, in fact, most of the Mughal victories were won by Rajput swords. They were the Sodam of it's very interesting. So that's even at a social context, the to destroy somebody is regarded as being very unsporting in our culture. If you've humiliated somebody, that is enough. We don't like to go all out. That may be a weakness, I don't know. But Jaya was deeper than that. Jaya was deeper than just a moral and an ethical way of behaving, or a manner to ensure that kings would not become tyrants and they would not become brutal and they would not launch genocide. Though all those factors are there, Jaya was an acknowledgement that no matter how much external success you get, if your internal dimension is messed up, then you have failed. We all know the story of the person who achieves great fame and achieves great money, and nevertheless is a pretty sad example of a human being. Throughout human history, we have those. They might or might not, depending on the context, have Vijay, but certainly unka Jay nahi hota hai. They have no internal victory or internal triumph. Jay is more like a triumph. And it's very interesting that the Mahabharata in its original context, the Mahabharata which is more or less the mind of India. If the Ramayana is the heart of India, the Mahabharata is the mind. And the Mahabharata, in its original context, its original version used to be called the Jaya, the internal victory. And the hero or the protagonist or the person who attains the Jaya is not Krishna, is not Arjuna, it is Yudhisthira. Yudhisthira is the ethical hero, because at the end of the narrative, he is the only human who goes to heaven in his mortal body. Even Krishna can't. None of the other Pandavas could. So the conventional hero is somebody like Arjuna because he is handsome, he's a great warrior, everybody knows him. But the culture knew that Arjuna is a Vijaya person, he is not a Jaya person. He is not a person who has gone into, even though he had permanent and perpetual mentorship of Krishna, Krishna reveals the Bhagavad Gita to him. What does he do? Years later, he tells Krishna, I've forgotten everything you've told me. Could you repeat that? Yeah, it's there in the Mahabharata. That episode is very clearly there in the Mahabharata, and Krishna has to inform him that you jackass, I may be the avatar, but even for me, such an expenditure of energy or such an expenditure of that level of consciousness is possible only once in life. It cannot be done on demand. It cannot be done like a action replay thing. So he gives a smaller discourse, very much smaller, which is called the Anugita, a sort of dumbed down version, Gita for dummies or Gita for Arjuna, which is the same thing, the atomic Gita. So just from that one episode, you would recognize that Arjuna did not come to Jaya, whereas just by telling his elder brother Yudhishthira what all Krishna told him, Yudhishthira came to a certain resolution with it. Now, the other thing that about the Mahabharata, why it became the Mahabharatam, because Mahabharata means the great book of Bharat, because the Jaya was so important a text, so transformative a text, that people began to add everything. People began to add all their knowledge to it. They began to extrapolate and it started growing larger and larger. Especially the Shanti Parva, which is supposed to be the talk of Bhishma to Yudhishthira on how to rule. It is a very much later interpolation. Now, what are the duties of a king? How does a king respond, react? So, since this text was so central to the consciousness, people began to keep adding whatever they thought was valuable. That is how it expanded to over 100,000 verses. But the original text was hardly some 15 or 16,000 verses, which is a hell of a lot, by the way. We don't realize that 100,000 is a lot. बहुत बड़ा number है. So the sense of internal transformation, which is always important to India, because India is the one culture in the world which its central values are enlightenment and liberation. We are the one culture in the world where everything that we do, all aspects of life, all aspects of culture, all aspects of daily behavior, all relationships are geared to furthering this Jaya. That is the Jaya, the enlightenment and the liberation. We place that enlightenment and liberation centrally. And today it seems to be that enlightenment and liberation is a sannyasa construct, or it is a specialist construct. It is only for people who abandon everything else and they come into that, and those people get enlightened and liberated. Well, usually that is true if a person specializes in something, if a person dedicates their life to something, they achieve greater success in it. That's normal, that's human nature. But that was not the point of the culture. The point of the culture was to create an environment, to create a kshetram, to create an entirely consecrated society, an entirely consecrated space. So very clearly it is said that Bharatam is the place that is below the Himalayas and above the ocean. That zone is Bharatam, and that place is sacred. So very clearly they had created that, and today Jaggi Vasudev is trying to create four gigantic Adi Shiva, Adi Guru murtis at the four geographical corners of the country, because it's actually quite an audacious thing. He's trying to reconsecrate the land. He's trying, because the Kshetram has been so badly damaged. The vibration of the Kshetram, that was Bharatam, has been so badly damaged. He's trying to reconsecrate it. It's a very, very audacious thing to do. And only yogis have such courage or such insanity, depending on what you want to think. Because it was true, at one time the whole country was living in a Kshetram, the whole country was living in a zone of possibility. But every action, you see, the way we celebrate festivals, the way we cook, the way we eat, the way we dress, the way we interact, the rules and regulations for interacting with people, everything was to help you constantly keep your compass in the zone of towards Jaya, not external victory, but internal, not even transformation, but transcendence. You had to overcome your limitations. You had to come beyond the 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 zone of embodiment and the zone of the mind and the zone of the emotions. You had to come beyond that. That is Jaya, and the only person who has done that, was Yudhishthira. Now, it is one of the great ironies that Yudhishthira and Duryodhan both basically mean the same thing. Duryodhan means very tremendous in battle or very phenomenal in battle, and Yudhishthira means Yuddha mein dheer, very firm in battle. But because in Duryodhan there is no sense of limitation, he just became an uncontrollable energy. Nobody dares to name their kids Duryodhan today because for obvious reasons. But the two basically mean the same, except that in the Yuddha mein dheer, so they don't even call Yudhishthir, because if they call him Yuddha mein dheer, then he is expected to be truthful at all times. So they created a substitute word for that, Randhir, Ran mein dheer, yeah, battle, and to be very firm, not to be covered. So the Randhir actually also means only Yudhishthir only. So because again, this is the triumph of the narrative that a person is believed by the culture. It is believed by the culture that a person can be that integral, that a person can be that honest, that we don't dare to give his name to anybody else. And we believe also that a person can be such a villain that we don't dare to give his name also to anybody else. Though now it's becoming common to name people Ravan for some reason. This is quite a trend growing up. Yeah. Which is not a bad thing actually, because after all, he was a very great man. Huh? Yudhishthira is also becoming common, which I am very glad now. I am very glad that Yudhishthira is also becoming common now. Yeah. Yeah. I am very glad that it's becoming common now, because he is, and this is something very interesting, because foreign authors or foreign commentators on the Mahabharata, they all understand that Yudhishthira is the ethical exemplar. He is one of the persons who has pushed the notion of ethics to limits that very, very few people dare. He is not a hero the way the classical Greeks and Romans are heroes. Achilles is a barbarian, compared to the people in the Mahabharata. Achilles is a fellow with anger management issues, in dire need of therapy. Though even he has moments of insight. There is the moment when they are placating him and they are telling him, yes, yes, we'll get you your girl back, we'll give you your honor back. And there is this passage which is supposed to be one of the most important passages in world literature, because there is a man who is acknowledging the limits of being human, where he says, death comes to the hero and the coward just the same, and all glory is ultimately futile and fleeting, and there has to be a more important way of determining the value of a life than how many people you killed or how much money you made. a very exceptional thing to hear. So they say about that passage that it is the birth of the ethical consciousness in the Western mind. Even though people are still scrambling to catch up with that. Similarly, everybody blames Yudhisthira because of that Vastraharan episode and because he told half a lie. So, a man has made two mistakes in his whole life and we can condemn him. And the rest of us. Now, gambling has always been the great sin of Indian culture. And given how much match fixing and everything that goes on, from the days of the Vedas, gambling has always been regarded as the greatest failing in the psyche. Indians are gamblers. And match fixing is basically happens because gamblers want to even their odds or whatever, and the amount of gambling that happens on Diwali, and so the tendency to gamble has always been one of the character flaws of India. It is from the Vedas. 6,000 years back, it is clear that this is deep seated. So, by writing that episode into the Mahabharata, they were creating a complete non-acceptance. It can never again be accepted as a reasonable thing to do, or it's just one of those things that kings do or something. The sheer horror of that episode was so great that after that, gambling can never again be, because it is very clearly said that he has lost his reason because he is in the grip of the gambling mania. A gambler is not a sane person. A gambler in the zone is not sane. He exhibits all the signs and symptoms of somebody who is going through a mental breakdown. And that was a mental breakdown for Yudhishthira because he got caught in that zone. And he couldn't listen to anybody and he couldn't say. And so even Draupadi in the end understands that it was like a temporary insanity. Temporary insanity is accepted as a justification for bad behavior. And he didn't even really tell a lie. He told a half lie because, that too because Krishna told him to do. The only way to get rid of Drona was to tell him that his son is dead. Ashwatthama hata iti narova kunjarova. Ashwatthama is dead, either the elephant or the man. So it's not even a full lie. But according to the later on, the expanded version of the Mahabharata, till that moment his chariot used to float above the ground. And at that moment his chariot came and started. He also descended to earth. So you had a man who had a nervous breakdown and he told half a lie and we are still busy condemning him. And there are books actually defending the Kauravas, and I'm like, a worse bunch of murderous thugs you cannot believe. Intellectual people are actually defending and blaming the Pandavas for seeking revenge. This is how sadly our culture and even our mind has fragmented. We have become stupid as a people. But Yudhishthira was a man who refused to compromise on ethical matters. And even in the Vedas and the Upanishads, morality is very much understood to be a matter of time and place. Very, very much. That morality is what is the social opinion of the time. But ethical matters, that which is dharma, that which is ritha is the underlying structure of the universe. And by doing an unethical action, you will damage dharma, because dharma is what holds everything together. And in the Vedas, the word dharma is never used. The word is always ritham. And even the Chinese know that. They know that as Li. The Taoists or the Taoists, they call that as Li. The underlying structure of the universe, the underlying truth of the universe is ritham. So Yudhishthira understood this, and that is what Jaya means, where you get to the point where there is no difference between your personal dharma and the dharma of the country, and not just to the dharma. You get to the point where you finally understand rhythm. Rhythm. You understand Ritha. This is in accordance with Ritha. This is in accordance with the fundamental truth and vibration of the universe. And that is what makes Yudhishthira so extraordinary, because even Sri Rama, who is an avatar, had to drop the body. When we say that Yudhishthira went to the body in his heaven in his mortal body, what we are saying is within the limitations of embodiment, he captured rhythm. He captured that sense of completely being in tune with the universe, because embodiment is a filter and a barrier between the universe and you. It might be a very weak barrier and the light is pouring in, but still, nevertheless, it is separation, and he was the one man who was not separated. So, he is the only person, or one of the few people, who is regarded as having attained Jaya. And that is why the book was called the Jaya. Because here is a person, by the steadfast adherence to the truth, by refusing to compromise on ethical matters, by, the Dharma, all the time his argument was this is adharmic, this is adharmic. And one day Draupadi lost her temper. I mean, it was a very easy thing for her because she never had it to begin with. Her temper was permanently lost. She was not a human, no, she was born of the fire, she was a vital being. So she was always fiery. She was always. That's the other thing you must remember about Draupadi. Draupadi was not human. Draupadi was actually a being from another dimension. So, people forget all these things. And, they ask these questions, how is this possible, that possible? And I'm like, if you accept that she was born of fire, then automatically we are not dealing with a normal realm. We are dealing with a slightly supernatural realm of functioning, So you have to accept these things. Just like the Ramayana, people get into tizzies, but Valmiki was basically channeling a narrative from another dimension. The Ramayana didn't really happen in this loka or in this dimension. It happened in another dimension. Now, yogis know all these things, because the minute you take up that book and the vibration of the words come, and not of this loka. This is from another loka. It's very clear. So sometimes that happens, sometimes that is possible, that beings of another dimension, whether Rakshasas or Asuras or Danavas or whatever, whichever being Draupadi was from whichever dimension she was from, sometimes they come to the earthly plane and they even get married and stuff like that. There was a rule against marrying Rakshasas, because anytime you married a Rakshasa and you had offspring, they would become supernaturally powerful. So all beings were forbidden from marrying Rakshasas. Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know. I'm just telling you that this is the yogic understanding of it. And it's not necessary. The core for the narrative is not that Yudhishthira was an avatar or he was a being from another dimension. The core of the narrative is that he was a human being and he became completely self-actualized. He became completely integrated with not just himself or his environment, with the universe. He got to the zone of Ritha. He was the man in whom there was no longer any divergence between the fundamental truth of the universe and whatever it is he is doing. He was no longer in a place where he was doing what he wanted because it was pleasant or because it was suiting him. Or he was quite an extraordinary man, because even when he became king, he's taking care of that Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. And he's treating them like they are still the royal family, and he's giving them all the respect. And Bhima was not like that, because Bhima was very human and he would very loudly to hurt those old people. Now, this is also part of the genius of the Mahabharata, where people are shown in all their reality. Very loudly, he would wait till they were around, and very loudly, he would boastfully describe to his friends how he killed the Kauravas, because he never forgave those two old people, that you are the reasons your sons ran amok and made us suffer like this. So all the years they were in the palace, and every year his taunting would grow deeper and deeper. And that is why in the end they quit and went into Vanaprastham, because they just couldn't take this taunting anymore. So Bhima again is one of the kindest, most compassionate, generous people on the planet, but because he was wounded, he became so bitter. I mean, if there was a really moral and ethical person in the Mahabharata, it is Bhima. He is the straightest person. But his anger at what they had to endure, he just couldn't overcome it. And so he was corrupted. Plus, he had a appetite problem. He was a greedy fellow. So Yudhishthira worked at everything. It is not like he was given more. No, actually, he was not. Nakula was the most handsome, Sahadeva was the most intelligent, Bhima was the strongest, Arjuna was, Arjuna was Arjuna. So he was actually, he was the most limited brother in every way. But he finally became the exemplar for human evolution for this reason. Now, it's a real tragedy that in India we don't appreciate him. Now, though, as I am saying, it's a very helpful shift in consciousness. I'm sure nobody is aware of these things. For some whatever reason they like Yudhishthira, maybe they saw the Mahabharata TV serial and realized, oh, it's a pretty nice guy, like, let's have a son like that. But it's a shift in consciousness that the name is becoming popular, because nobody would use that, basically because we didn't want to have that burden of always being truthful. Now, it everybody tells children don't lie. Even when we are telling them that, we know we are lying, and in our hearts we know that we are imposing an impossible standard on them. But he never took it like that. He actually took it to mean don't lie means don't lie, and say the truth under all circumstances. There are some episodes where, when he was in disguise in that Virat, when they were in that 13th year, they had to be in disguise, and how he had to uh, explain certain things that he knew, because it is very obvious that he's way too talented and competent to be what he claims to be. So how he had to explain the things he knew and the abilities he had without lying, and at the same time not revealing his identity, those are all very rather funny things of the matter. But you see, the reason why this was formulated in yoga or in our culture was because the tendency is to go for the Vijaya. So even in the Mahabharata, there is no Vijay, because at the end, these 5 people and Krishna are left alive. Ashwatthama has killed everybody. And he has launched a nuclear missile. When they catch up with him, after he's destroyed the whole this thing, he launches the Brahmastra. Even in my Secret India Tarot, I have written about that. The Brahmastra, the description of how it impacts and the kind of devastation it leads and the poisoning the environment for generations, it is exactly a nuclear strike. And that is why Krishna curses him, But the point is, when they went for the Vijayam, when they went for the external victory, all that happened in the end was part of the country was permanently rendered into desert, because that the missile, the Astra, the Brahmastra that he launched had to go somewhere. So it went and it actually devastated a place. Everybody is wiped out. So it is very clearly understood that the end of Kurukshetra is not a Vijayam, because there is no Vijay there. There is just ruin. There is just devastation. Now people don't realize that. People think, oh, it meant that the bad guys lost and the good guys won. That is in the Ramayana, where at the end of it, that Indra gives a boon and all the Vanaras who died fighting Ravana and the Rakshasa are brought back to life. So that that is the real thing. That is the sense of that Vijayam, where, at a material plane the victory. But in the Mahabharata, because the Mahabharata is not a book for sweet and simple things. The Mahabharata, the Jaya, is not a book about what we would like, but it is just about the human condition, which is why Vedavyasa very clearly said, what is not in here is not found anywhere. He openly said that. In this book, all dimensions of human life are captured, and what is not here is not found anywhere. So this sense of external triumphalism, this sense of external victory, it really ends in this complete downbeat note. It ends in this complete, and the victory that they have won is basically reconstructing their society, spending years and years and years reconstructing the society, and then they can't even enjoy that. They hand it over to Arjuna's grandson, and they go. So the only person who from the beginning of the book is evolving psychologically and is becoming greater visibly is Yudhishthira. So to come back to the point, because he constantly uses dharma, dharma is regarded as duty, which is a very sad translation of the word. Dharma is the foundation of the world of consciousness. Dharma is what holds everything together. If society or people become adharmic, then that will create a ripple effect and everything falls apart. So whenever something is functioning well, that means dharma is there. So since he is constantly talking about dharma, she gets wild, and Draupadi asks him, what is the purpose of this dharma of yours, which is putting all of us into such trouble, and these nasty people there are enjoying? What use is this stupid dharma of yours? So he reprimanded her. He told her, that the most valuable things are never because they are useful. And that time they were right up in the north of India. So he took her out of the hut and he showed her the Himalayas, and he said, what is the use of the Himalayas? If you ask me why I love the Himalayas, I cannot tell you, but it is there and I love it. And it is not because it is useful, and it is not because it is doing, but because it is in my inherent nature. There is something deep within me that recognizes this is sacred ground, this is sacred space. And it is that truth which calls forth the love for the Himalaya. Similarly with dharma, there is something deep within me which knows that if we start abandoning dharma because it is not convenient, then we are creating catastrophe into the society. So at that moment she accepts, but like I said, she and Bhima would never let go of that. It was like a permanent daily argument. If you let go of dharma, there is a catastrophe. Now dharma does not mean the moral prescriptions, which is why there is a whole thing of vyavaharika, that vyavahar, behavior, adat, the way of being, that is one thing, that is not the authentic thing. So there are very interesting, in the Mahabharata only there is this story that there was this great famine at one time, and Vishwamitra, the great Vishwamitra, Brahma Rishi Vishwamitra, was starving, and finally he came to one town where, because of the famine, there are a lot of dead animals. So the local butcher has hung up dog meat, and he takes it and he eats. And they got, people got very upset. You are the great Brahma Rishi Vishwamitra. How can you eat meat? And he like, first one must stay alive, then one can be a Brahma Rishi. I think that's the first time in world literature that argument was put, first. No, because one of the Greek philosophers also said, first one must stay alive, then one can philosophize, So he very clearly says, first one must stay alive, then you can be a Brahma Rishi. So he was very clearly saying that that is not dharma, that is not ritha. In a crisis situation, you are allowed to take whatever nourishment comes to you. So Yudhishthira was never a moralistic person. Nothing that he would say or do was from a moralistic perception. In fact, he was way too forgiving. So many times the Kauravas used to get their ass kicked by either by Arjuna or by somebody else, and each time he would say, "No, this is not the way." You don't realize that, but the Kauravas were defeated multiple times. Once there was a Gandharva called Chitrangada who defeated them. And he bound them up and brought them in front of Yudhishthira and said, "Okay, here's your chance. I'll execute these jokers right now." And he said, "No." Arjuna defeated them, all of them, when they attacked at the end of the 13 years when they attacked all of them. He walloped all of them. Krishna, Karna, Duryodhana, Bhishma, Drona, Kripacharya, all the great warriors single-handedly walloped all of them. Then how did they get the energy to fight? Because this episode of the Mahabharata is not known that they all went into demonic avesha. Duryodhana went to commit suicide out of the shame of that matter, and these asuras and danavas and all got into that, and they actually they were becoming like the asura prakriti, which is opposing the avatar of Krishna, which is opposing the mission of the Krishna avatar. They actually went into all these people. Not Kripacharya, which is why Kripacharya, because he was Kripacharya's brother-in-law of Drona and one of the immortals. It couldn't go into him because he was too straight up person. But even Bhishma and Drona, and they say the reason why they could be possessed was because their blood had become tainted by eating the Kaurava food. Because it doesn't make any sense otherwise. They are being consistently walloped before, and suddenly in Kurukshetra, the strength and the ability and the power and the knowledge to oppose is there. It doesn't make any sense. This was the reason why. Because that is why Krishna was consistently saying, finish it, because he can see that these are not those human beings anymore. They have now become vessels for the demonic power to come and flow. And what Ashwatthama did also was something demonic, because nobody in the right mind, and Ashwatthama was one of the very great people, by the way. Today he is known as a villain, but it is because he was under that demonic avesham, he was under that demonic possession, that he launched the Brahmastra and he attacked in the night and he murdered people in their sleep and set fire to the camp and everything. Kripacharya was about the only person who was not under, because he was quite a great man in his own right. He was immortal. Kripacharya was immortal. Ashwatthama was immortal. That is another story altogether. But Ashwatthama and Kripacharya are the two people who are supposed to announce the Kalki avatar. They are the people who will give the stamp of the certification of authenticity that this is indeed the Kalki avatar. So many people claim to be the Kalki avatar, and I'm like, cool, I don't want to meet the avatar. I want to meet Ashwatthama and Kripacharya. Again, all these are interesting sidelights on the Mahabharata, but the point is not that. The point is, this man never lost his compass. Yudhishthira never ever lost his ethical compass. He always knew this is not good. This is not good in the larger context. This is not good for society. This is not good for people. If we encourage this kind of, there's one extraordinary sequence where he actually says that if we retaliate now, we will be retaliating in anger, and we will be doing that because our feelings were hurt and our ego was hurt and our pride was hurt, and it won't be because it is something that is right, or it won't be an example to people. People will pick it up that we are doing it because of our ego. They will not pick it up that we are doing it because we are opposing bad behavior or evil behavior. I mean, what level of psychological maturity was in the man? So this is a, even that Mahabharata thing, he was probably portrayed better than in most other portrayals. It was quite an interesting portrayal when that serial was going on. But even over there, they didn't really get that here was a man who was constantly grappling with what are the consequences of what I do. I am a person in responsibility. My actions will impact everybody. Everybody will start making rules and regulations on what I am doing. They will quote me as an excuse or an example. They will quote me as a reason to do something. They will follow what I am doing, what needs to be done. And more than anybody else, even more than Krishna, he knew that an entire civilization and culture is going to be destroyed root and branch. What value are we giving to justify this catastrophe? What sort of a better world or better ways of living, better ways of functioning are we going to bring forward to justify this catastrophe? All the knowledge is going to be wiped out. All the great families are going to be wiped out. What are we leaving for society? What are we leaving for a country that can justify this? And unless I can justify that, I won't fight. So people are consistently saying he was a coward, he was too peaceful, he was too much in love with ahimsa. Not so. The arguments are very, very nuanced. The arguments against going to war are very, very, very brilliantly nuanced. But then we don't read the books, we don't have the original translations, nobody knows. And he was consistently saying that we are, because he was under no illusions also. He knew very well that this is not going to end well. From the beginning, he was saying that this will end in complete catastrophe. Nobody will be in any sense happy. Everybody will only be in grief. But when Krishna convinced him that if you are the king, you can create a certain social setup, you can create certain ethical ways of functioning, behaving, you can provide leadership in a manner that will endure, in a manner that will be of value, and it is a better setup than the one that currently exists. That's when he finally took up the responsibility to become king. And again, it is not something that we value. We don't like Yudhisthira very much because as a people we are absolutely in love with power. We are obsessed with it. And here you have a man who is consistently saying, what good can I do? I know all the evil I can do if I have power, but what good can I do if I have power? And he was very clear about the corrupting nature of power. He knew that also better than anybody else. We don't like that because the power, the benefits that power can give, it is so clear to us that we don't like a person who questions that is power something that is valuable, is power something that is ethical, is power something that these are uncomfortable questions, and we don't like people who make us uncomfortable. Now, just yesterday I was telling them when I was doing the tarot class that our notion of Krishna is always this divinely smiling person with the flute and dancing. And the fact is, from the time he was 4 or 5, 6 or 7 years old, he was a phenomenally violent guy. Kamsa would keep sending asuras and demons to kill him, and he would wallop the life out of them and kill them in gory manner, rip them apart. At the age of 12, when he goes to meet Kamsa for the first time, this elephant attacks him and he tears the tusk off the elephant, beats the mahak to death with it, and then beats the elephant to death with it. And people would say, Ekalavya, the great Ekalavya, he got moksha at the hands of Krishna. How did Krishna kill him? He crushed his head with a rock. Ekalavya signed up with Jarasandha and attacked Krishna again in Dwarka. So Krishna actually crushed his head with a rock. So his perpetual smile and universal favor was probably because people were terrified that you never know when this guy is going to explode, and then he'll do something phenomenally violent. And we have just shut that side of Krishna out of our consciousness. We just don't want to think of that side of Krishna. And the truth is, that is why he was Krishna. That is why wherever he went, he had no formal position. He wasn't very big in the royalty or anything. No matter where he went, everybody is giving him seat of honor, worshipping him because people are scared shitless. And why don't we see that? Why don't we see that he was the. See, the society had become rotten. He knew that. Krishna was very clear that the society had become rotten and needs to be cleansed. The ruling classes have become exploitative. They have become people who are only concerned about themselves. They have no concern about society and what is going on. He knew and he wanted them cleansed. He wanted that whole ruling class of Kshatriyas destroyed. And he was very clear, this is my agenda. I want the Kshatriyas wiped out. They have become a nuisance to the world. Why would Parashurama, who hates Kshatriyas, teach Bhishma and Karna and Drona, and they are the enemies of Krishna? Does anybody think about that? So it's part of the agenda, it's all setting is being done. They are already planning long time. Parashurama is a rishi. You mean to say he doesn't know that Karna is lying his head off when he comes and says, I'm a Brahmin? He knew instantly, but there was a reason why, because you needed such strong people on the other side. So the point is, what Yudhishthira would say was, okay, so this is, he also did not disagree that this is not the way to run a country, that this is not the way to live, or this is not the way to rule. He was not at all in disagreement with that. What he was saying is that, are we sure that we can provide something of greater value? On what basis are we enthusiastically preparing for a catastrophe like this? Because for Arjuna, it was, he has a chance to be the center of attraction because he is Arjuna, everybody will look to him, greatest warrior of the time. Bhima is like, I'm going to kill those guys, because it did not matter to him. But he just, Draupadi is urging them and she won't tie her hair up, because I need to wash it with blood and, all that kind of. So, those are all emotional reactions. And there is this extraordinary thing in the forest where Duryodhana tells, not Duryodhana, Yudhishthira tells Bhima, you will regret this bloodthirst of yours because it is clouding your mind. And it happens. One of the brothers, Vikarna, one of the brothers actually stands up in that thing and protests that whole Draupadi Vastraharan. And in the battle, Bhima is so infuriated, he can't even see it and he kills him. And after he kills him, this is again one of the most extraordinary things in the Mahabharata. He has a breakdown in the middle of the battlefield, saying, what have I done? You were the one decent fellow on that side, and because of my rage, and Yudhishthira told me this would happen. Because he understood he has committed a sin at that moment. He has destroyed somebody who actually stood up for them. Yuyutsu, you remember Yuyutsu? He was the son of Dhritarashtra, but not from Gandhari, from a servant girl. At the beginning of the battle, again, this is Yudhishthira. At the beginning of the battle, he does something unprecedented. He goes right in between the two armies and he says, I believe that what we are doing is for the sake of Dharma. I believe it is for the sake of the higher consciousness. If anybody on that side believes that is so, please cross over. We will accept you, no questions asked. And you used to cross over. And not only that, he's the only survivor. Even when they go on Vanaprastha, Yuyutsu is left. That time Arjuna's grandson Parikshit is too young. So Dhritarashtra's dream that his son will sit on the throne of Hastinapura was fulfilled after all. Now, can you imagine a guy, he's just going right out there and saying, I think that what we are doing is not for just for a personal agenda. I think that what we are doing is for the social good, is for the good of the culture. If anybody agrees with that, please cross over. And he does it. In all of world literature, you won't find something like that. So he's not telling crossover and share the secrets with us and we'll make you rich, or he's just saying if you think what we are doing is correct, if you think that what we are doing is valuable, you cross over. And the all the Pandavas are constantly groaning, oh, this man and his nobility will le dubega apne ko. As a culture, we have almost completely forgotten about Jaya. We are totally committed to Vijaya. That is the problem. We have completely forgotten about the self transcendence. And the Jaya has now been outsourced to the specialists. You wear Gerua, you go and become, sit in an ashram. On Jaya is only for them. And I think that is catastrophic. Even when we say Jai Sri Ram, there's a Jaya is that transcendent thing. Sri is not Shri as in Mr., but Sri. Jai Sri Ram it should actually be, not Sri Ram. Sri is that vibration of abundance and bliss and glory. It is that thing that shines in the face when somebody is functioning at their peak and doing well. That is Sri. And Rama was an example of that. So every time we say Jai Sri Ram, we are trying to invoke that quality. It is a remembrance, it is a smarana. We are trying to invoke that quality in ourselves. That is why it is a greeting. That is why it is a slogan. That is why it is a chant. Now, of course, it has become a very kind of militant, threatening thing. It is better that we keep the traditional battle cry, Hara Hara Mahadeva is probably better, because Hara means the snatcher. You're going to snatch somebody's life better. Hara Hara Mahadeva probably much better. Jai Sri Ram as a battle cry is completely inappropriate. Jai Sri Ram is just that. In those three words, that is the goal. This is the quality. This is the example. Jai Sri Ram. In those three words, we are constantly bringing the smarana, we are constantly bringing the remembrance of that. This is what we go to, this is what we are aiming at. And the thing is, no doubt Rama is the exemplar, Maryada Purushottam, all that, but the thing is, even he could not, because the consciousness was such, or because he was an avatar, he didn't need to do it, but a human being did it. A human being attained Jaya. The Jaya is attained by Yudhishthira, and there might have been other people we do not know, or there are great spiritual people and we do not know. But a king, that is mind boggling. That is completely mind boggling. So, it really upsets me, and it amuses me also sometimes when I hear the way Jai Sri Ram is used, because people don't know. People don't know, because it is very clearly that is the goal, this is the quality, this is the example, and we are supposed to align ourselves with all those. Rama again was not, Rama and Yudhishthira are wrongly understood as being very sweet and mild people. Not true at all. Because Rama was known as Naravyagra, the human tiger. Nobody gets called the Naravyagra because they are pussycats. But like Yudhishthira, if there is any person who was like Yudhishthira, it was probably Rama. Because he also would say the same thing. I won't do this because it is personally suitable or it is personally advantageous. No. And everybody else used to get agitated over that. The people around him used to get agitated over that. But he knew, if I do that and I am the king or I am the prince, if I do that, then there will be trouble. Because then everybody will slide into a vyavaharika mode. Everybody will slide into a whatever is convenient at the moment. That becomes our, and no, there are transcendent things, there are transformatory things, and we cannot leave that. We cannot leave that for everybody's individual prejudice. Now, we are thinking about a different kind of maturity used to exist in India. A different kind of adult consciousness used to exist in India, which does not exist today, unfortunately. It is either a second childhood or rampant senility. I do not know. It's we don't match up to those people. We don't match up to those people because, you know, if you look at the Gita, you have to understand that this is a phenomenally adult consciousness. It is not a naive consciousness. It is not a childish consciousness. It is not a hopeful consciousness. It's a very, very pragmatic, and that mindset was common at one time, and it's not so today. And the interpretations of the Gita and everything, and I'm like, you cannot pick and choose your Krishna. You either have to take him as he was, or you have to leave him. You cannot pick and choose, oh, cute little boy running around, and you cannot do that. You have to take him as he is. I have no problems with that. I'm just saying, please remember, he was most fearsome guy. You know, his brother was permanently drunk. You know, in all the things they say, Balarama, his eyes red with wine, tottering. You know, he couldn't even stand straight, except when it came to fight, because that was just, he was so intense that he used to take the alcohol to sort of medicate himself, just to keep the consciousness in the body. His intensity was so great. And the minute there was some kind of crisis situation, suddenly he's phenomenally clear. And so there were people at different kinds of vibration. Now, you know, people see that, oh, Balarama used to drink, therefore I can drink. Can you do the things Balarama did? But trust me, Krishna was much more dangerous than Balarama, because, you know, at least Balarama used to medicate himself and keep that consciousness in the body, and Krishna was always outside. Why would Krishna listen to Yudhishthira? People don't. Krishna would advise, he would say this, that, everything, but in the end, Yudhishthira had the last word. The final decision was always Yudhishthira. Nobody asked that. Yudhishthira knows this is the avatar. His mother knows, he knows, everybody with any brains at the time know this is the avatar. Nevertheless, here is Krishna deferring, and we accept it as, oh, that is because Yudhishthira was elder. Nonsense. Those kind of things did not. Because Krishna knew this man is the doorway for human consciousness. This is the man through which the new possibility and the new human can be. The actual real Jaya can happen through this man. He is the one who can set that. But you know, what a tragedy. So in a sense, it is very nice that the original word for the Mahabharata is now becoming known again. Many people, you know, it is a Jaya. Though if you look at the Shanti Parva, nothing in that is Jaya. It is all Vijaya, you know, because it's all very hard-nosed pragmatism in that. But it's a very much later interpolation. So that really doesn't negate the argument. And you know, even that final episode, that this dog has been my friend, so if my dog cannot come into heaven, then I don't need to go to heaven. The man had his priorities very clear. You know? And who said? Mark Twain said that I wouldn't go to heaven if there were no dogs there. You know, somebody like, if there won't be dogs in heaven, then heaven is not worth going to. I think they're quite right. Dogs, because in terms of, huh? Yeah, you know, in terms of, no human being can love like that. You know, that kind of complete love that a dog exhibits is very rare. Very exceptional human beings only can, and it's possible for every dog. Okay, there are some dogs which are nasty and vicious. That's usually because they've been tortured when they were puppies. But a normal dog, a healthy dog, the kind of love it can show, and the kind of love it can express. So again, he's quite right. Why would I want to come to a place where this kind of consciousness is not welcome? That is what it means. It's not like, oh, he was so loyal, see, or, we have this whole sentimental approach. Oh, so sweet. He was so, you know, if this kind of, if this kind of consciousness is not welcome, why would I go there? So it's again, it was, of course, it was a test. It was a test whether he has really got to that point of Jaya, because all of them die. The Pandavas were very great, but all of them die. Draupadi dies first because she always had secret partiality towards Arjuna in her heart. Nakula dies because he was always very proud that I am the most handsome man on the planet. Sadeva dies because he was very proud that I am the most intelligent and knowledgeable man on the planet. Arjuna dies because he was great pride that I am the greatest warrior on the planet. And Bhima dies because, no control over his desire. Greed, gluttony, he always had that problem. And also, I think those 13 or whatever, those 30 years or, 30 years, I think, after the war, where he was just basically day by day dripping venom on those two old people. That is probably more, but no control over the emotion. In the end, he was emotionally uncontrolled. So Yudhishthira starts as a very limited person. Yudhishthira starts as a person who is not naturally gifted. And just by adhering to the principle of dharma, just by adhering to the principle of authenticity and truth, he just grows and grows and grows until he surpasses the avatar. We do not realize that. We do not realize that what courage Vedavyasa and our authors had, where we say that a human being can surpass the avatar. But that's my point. I keep saying that the central core of India is that the human being is the most important life form in the universe. More important than the gods. What Vedavyasa is saying is that a human being, by being authentic, by following rhythm, by following dharma, can surpass the avatar, and that is Jaya. Sometimes I can't breathe when I think of the sheer courage and audacity these people had. They just they just put something so casually down. Yeah, the human being is more important than the gods. Because the gods are not capable of Jaya. The gods are capable of Vijaya. The Devas, that is to say. The whole Amongst that whole crowd, there is only one Rishi, and that happens to be Narad. So he is the only Rishi in the Devas. No? So only one has attained. So, the minute we say that, everybody starts smiling, because then we realize, oh yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? So the limitations of the human frame and the human life are not really limitations, because the human life or the human consciousness is the only consciousness that is capable of becoming unlimited. Even the Deva consciousness is not capable. So that ability to attain, that is Jaya, and that here, this loka, this plane, this dimension, that is Jaya. So I just thought it was interesting, because we should give up this obsession with Vijaya. It is nice, okay, it is useful and needed, but the centrality of the culture has always been Jaya. Yes, Sarvam Shivamaya and Jai Sri Ram.